I'll be staggered if something substantial, what most people would refer to as a black swan, I will be massively surprised. In fact, I would make a $50,000 to $100,000 bet that sometime between now and August, there is some event that we like, wow, a COVID-19, 9/11 type event.
On the Spot with Michelle Makori is brought to you by Swan Bitcoin.
Hello, I'm Michelle Makori. Thank you for joining us. We're going into the uncharted waters of 2024 with perhaps a perfect storm of variables and uncertainties. A likely Fed pivot, a looming US recession. Will we get a hard landing or a soft landing? A potential global economic slowdown, critical elections in the US, which are already unprecedented, and heightened geopolitical tensions with flashpoints from the Middle East to Russia, Ukraine, to China and Taiwan that could easily spark major escalations. And those are just some of the known unknowns. So how does one position a portfolio to best navigate these choppy waters? Well, multimillionaire, entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and investor Gary Cardone says his second largest position in this environment is Bitcoin. And he joins us to explain why and give us his outlook for 2024. Gary is the CEO and founder of Cardone Digital Ventures. His extensive expertise spans energy, real estate, financial services, and Web 3.0, earning him a reputation for predicting and navigating radical market shifts and trends. Gary began his career in energy commodities and helped shape the natural gas sector in the US through his work with Natural Gas Clearinghouse, overseeing more than 30% of natural gas acquisitions for the US and Canada. And Gary was also the architect of the UK's National Balancing Point, known today as one of the most reliable energy trading hubs in the world. He was also one of the youngest ever CEOs of a Fortune 50 company. And after finding success in energy and natural gas, he ventured into real estate, payments, and financial technology, and here to Kitco. So good to have you with us, Gary. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I think we should end this conversation now because it's probably at the very peak of your introduction. Thank you for the kind words.
That is the abbreviated bio, Gary. Just want to give our viewers a little bit of a background on you so they know why they should pay attention when you have something to say. And you certainly have some very interesting and insightful things to say. And I'll start off with what we touched on when we spoke offline. And you said that currently your second largest holding is Bitcoin. So let's start there. What percentage of your portfolio is Bitcoin, percentage-wise?
As a percentage, it's about, at today's price, it's about 30%. And
Okay.
I think it's way too low. I'm embarrassed that it doesn't match my conviction and understanding of this asset class. And the having gone through this before, we always underestimate the change that occurs from these type of events.
And this is and at 30%, it's your second largest position. I'm going to get into the why, but before we do that, this is straight Bitcoin, or is this Bitcoin as well as Bitcoin-related companies like miners or other companies like MicroStrategy, for example?
This is straight Bitcoin.
Straight Bitcoin. So 30% of your portfolio is straight Bitcoin going into a 2024, which, as I've touched on, has many, many, many volatile triggers, lots of known unknowns and also unknown unknowns. I mean, as I touched on at the top, we know the Fed is most likely going to pivot. We are anticipating big changes for the US economy, some saying hard landing, some saying soft landing. Who knows? We've also got major geopolitical tensions, as I touched on, everything from the Israel-Gaza war to Russia-Ukraine war going into its second year to escalating tensions with China and Taiwan, with President Xi saying the reunification of China with Taiwan is inevitable. So certainly no shortage of volatility triggers. What is your macro outlook for 2024, your 10,000-foot overview of what we can expect for 2024?
Chaos and confusion.
All right. Chaos and
it's-
confusion.
It just seems like we're at the precipice of everything breaking down. We have a Fed pal who thinks he's in control of everything, and he's in control of everything until a large sovereign like China releases trillions of dollars or yuan into the marketplace. You got Europe has to do something. I mean, this debt deal they just announced, I was reading through, it's so complicated. It's a promise to do nothing. I just think we're going to see more flooding of heroin all across the financial industry. I call it heroin because it's the best analogy. You know, junkies either rehab or they die. And this mechanism of being able to print money, it's just too easy. If I was in control, I would print money. I would print and I would print and I would print and I would print until the patient is either dead and someone else has to take care of them. I mean, I think people are grossly underestimating how long this can go on. And that's true of the Bitcoin community. They seem like, you know, hey, this is all going to end tomorrow. But I think it's very difficult to determine how long a Fed can print. And quite frankly, I think most of the population is happy when they print. So it solves voting, it solves unrest. And I think, quite frankly, tightening to 500% from zero in 6 months, that was insanity. Zero was insanity. It's just very unstable. It's very difficult to make economic decisions on large blocks of investment strategy for a family that are based on no fundamentals whatsoever. I mean, we had a war. We were talking yesterday. When 9/11 happened, the stock market went down, 27% in 10 days. And in Israel, when the Israeli thing went off, a month or so ago, the stock market went up 2%. Now, explain that to me. For me, it's really fundamentally unexplainable. So it seems to me like someone's pulling the strings behind the curtain, and that's really hard for me to make investment strategy behind. So that really is what leads me to Bitcoin, because it takes me to a safe haven place. But I think we're probably going to be at war this year, and I'm not even sure we're going to have an election. It's to me, this is a really, really important period in time.
You know, Gary, as you say that, I genuinely get chills down my spine. And we touched on this yesterday, and I was expecting you to say this, and still hearing someone like you, someone that is experienced in the world of financing, in the world of macroeconomics, say it so matter of fact that you think we're going to have a big war and we may not have elections is a very chilling prospect. So let's unpack that. Let's start off with a war. You said offline that you think we'll know if we're in World War III in about 4 to 5 months' time. Elaborate on that.
Well, I think we have an election, right? We have an election in November, hopefully. Everybody's talking about whether we're going to have a fair election. Hell, I'm just worried about having an election. There's chaos and mayhem going on all over the world. I don't know how a stock market goes up when, an event bigger than 9/11 happened. I don't get it. Seems unstable, sounds unstable, feels unstable. You speak to people that are living in New York like yourself, and I don't hear a lot of happy people living there paying inordinate taxation. And all your billionaires are moving out of town, so your taxation by default is going to go up if you stay there, just as it is in California, and just as we said it would go up in California. For the past 30 years, we've been saying this, that California would have a major, major problem, and it's happening. So you have 22 million people that have been displaced out of the Ukraine. They are women, children, male and female, and I don't know how Europe handles 22 million people. Okay, they're already broke. If the euro breaks apart, and the Eurozone breaks apart, which I believe that the entire Eurozone construct was like paper mache, the UK were made fun of for exiting the EU, and I actually maintain that they never joined the EU because they retained their right to print those £50 notes. So I don't think that the United Kingdom was ever a part of the EU. They don't produce anything. They have no energy resources. They have no agriculture. I'm not making fun of them. It's just a fact, okay? Europe doesn't produce anything. And so if you got 22 million girls, boys, and children flooding into Europe, who's going to take care of them in the hospitals, the housing, food, the water? And that was before, or that's after the entire Euro constructs just kind of failed. You slammed 11 countries together, 11 cultures, and you're expecting them all to be held together by some notes that are printed with the name Euro on them. So massive debt. I don't know how you work yourself out of this unless you just flood the whole market and we go, this is my prediction. In Europe, they will place multiple trillion-dollar bonds under the guise of clean energy, and they will nuclearize the entire landscape of Europe. That will then literally, there will be very little imports of fossil fuel into Europe, which will flood the rest of the market, the rest of the entire world. I don't think we're ever going to see $100 oil again. If this plays out correctly, which would be that the governments, to hide the abuse of how they've treated, taxation, they will launch a monster bond, call it the nuclear green era, and man, that is going to have severe consequences on the marketplace. So I could see a massive recession. I could see a depression. But before any of that, I think it's just easier to claim war, a big bad boogeyman, than it is to talk about the incompetency of the politicians. I hate to be so negative, but I think that's where we're at.
Well, let's revisit the point you made about U.S. elections before we fully sort of start to speculate how this war unfolds. Because you're saying that you think elections in the U.S. may not happen in 2024. That would be unprecedented. We've never canceled elections before in the United States of America. Through other wars, through pandemics even, and yes, many would question whether those elections were in fact free and fair. That's a whole other debate, but we've never actually canceled elections in the United States. When you say you think that this is a scenario for 2024, how likely do you think this is? Is this like, a far tail risk of less than 1%? Or do you think that this is something that's a real likelihood? Give this to me, if you will, in gambling odds.
Well, maybe cancels. I didn't mean to say cancel, but you and I are now having a discussion here, and people are willing to actually spend minutes, if not hours, on, hey, does Trump even make it to the ballot? Does Biden make it to the ballot? I mean, we're asking really fundamental questions like, hey, the two guys that are in the lead, do they even show up? Mm-hmm. I had this conversation about, the death of one of these people. Like, one of these guys could be assassinated, and it's stunning to me that people are willing to have the conversation. It's actually something that is worth discussing and considering.
Yeah.
Look, I just think we're in a highly unstable time. So I listen to the alarm going off, and something's going off in New York right now. You're probably like, hey, what the hell is going on?
You know what? I think it's poetic. As we're talking about this, as you're raising the alarm, quite literally hearing alarms going off in New York. So certainly echoing your sentiment and amplifying what you're saying. But yeah, you make a very valid point in terms of Trump. Well, we don't know, even though he is the Republican favorite, according to the polls. We know that, Colorado's trying to take him off the ballot. We'll see how the Supreme Court handles that one. But with all of these other legal actions against him, you're quite right. We don't even know if he'll represent. And while Biden is theoretically claimed to be the Democratic nominee, yeah, the conversation, the buzz is that it won't actually be Biden potentially representing the Democratic Party. And it's not just buzz. I mean, we had one of the leading Republican candidates, Vivek Ramaswamy, call it out in one of the debates, saying, let's end this charade. Let's know who we're really going to be running against. Is it Biden or is it, and this is Vivek Ramaswamy's words, Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom, perhaps, or somebody else. So, yeah, I can definitely see why this election has more, question marks hovering over it than others. But you're saying that this sort of narrative and discussion is a big theme in the circles that you're in terms of how people are positioning themselves and financially going into 2024.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was with a gentleman this morning, and he's moving into Bitcoin for this very, very concern. At the same time, he says, hey, I'm not even going to vote, right? I'm done. I'm apathetic. And I said, no, you will vote because I'm going to drag your ass to the polls. See, I don't really care who you vote for, but I do think that we should tell our politicians, hey, we want to vote. It is our right. And we want to vote that, represents the majority of the people. Look, whether we have war today or war after the election, if we have one, my concern is war. I think the United States needs to stop going to war. I am willing to vote for a pig, okay, an obnoxious human being, someone with not a perfect record, if he does not take us to war. And if we are in a war, it's fast, it's furious, and we're not outsourcing it to other countries while U.S. taxpayers are sitting over here paying for the war, but we're not sending our children to that war. See, I believe that if we're going to be at war, we should send our children to the war. That will stop most wars. When moms got to send their kids, their 18-year-olds, to Ukraine, you will have people freaking out. But right now, it's a little bit like school, right? We just send the kids to school and forget about them for 8 hours. This is Ukraine, okay? And I think it's insane, okay? It's absolutely insane. It doesn't help anyone. I don't like hurting anyone. And I don't, actually, I protest paying taxes when they're used for nefarious reasons and we're harming other people with no real clear understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. And that's what I love about Bitcoin, because I can understand Bitcoin's purpose and utility. It's not going to get tainted by a bunch of agendas, little silly things like, hey, make sure you don't have that label on that video, right? These are old constructs of, can't have the Bombardier in there in the picture without Bombardier paying us. That's the plane over there. That's the old age. The new age is pure transparency. And that's all I'm asking for, is that our political process and the politicians, and I do like Vivek, because Vivek would immediately put us on the blockchain and be more transparent about at least 30 or 40% of the way the government spends money. So it's a slippery slope. We've gotten here over 50, 60, 70 years. And I don't think you just pop out of it by electing one person to office.
All right. And again, before I really unpack into why you think Bitcoin is the safe haven for all of this volatility, just to recap, you think elections may or may not happen. You really have that as something that comes with a question mark as to whether we'll actually have elections in 2024.
Yeah, major cyber attack would stop our election.
Yeah.
Major cyber attack in October. Poof. Oh gosh, there's no election. Major cyber attack. Okay. I mean, let's remember. Okay, people are going to sit here and think Gary's all crazy. Two major pipelines, thousands of miles of pipelines were blown up by someone. Okay. I'm pretty sure it was not the Ukraine. I hear this. Oh, the Ukraine did it. The Ukraine didn't blow those pipes up. The Ukraine's making money from that pipeline, those fees. So much less whether they would even have the technology or capability. A dam was blown up in the Ukraine. That's going to have a long-lasting impact on supply chain, both in the natural gas world and in the world of food. We've had massive disruptions on crude oil, right? And guess what? Nothing happens. The price just keeps staying right here. And this is to me, the canary in the coal mine. When you can't disrupt the energy markets, ISIS was not able to do it. Hey, let's embargo those barrels. The only thing people are doing by putting these embargoes on is allowing small little countries or warring nations to make 20 and 30 bucks, which ends up in Goldman Sachs' pocket or some trading house in Bulgaria who's selling crude oil to the Indians. And I don't blame the Indians for buying crude $30 cheaper. It's crude oil, man. It's every bit of it. It's just a fungible product. See, the politicians think they can stop these markets. You can't stop fungible markets. You just can't stop them. So the embargoes don't work. The cutting everybody's credit cards up, the enemies, calling Visa and MasterCard, that needs to stop. The Visa and MasterCard can just stop people from using credit card transactions because they're the enemy of the state. These are not open markets. And intervention always results in negative consequences into a market if you really believe that markets work, if you let them work, right? If you just let everything work out. So I think that we've had too much intervention, and sooner or later you have to pay the maker for all these consequences, all these decisions that have been made that have real life ramifications.
Right. You know, you mentioned a cyber attack, Gary, not to sound conspiracy theorist, but the World Economic Forum has it on their website that we should expect a major cyber attack, given the details of what that would look like, who would be impacted, and that we need to prepare for it, saying that it can happen in the next 2 years. This is telegraphed on the World Economic Forum, which also telegraphed quite clearly that there would be a COVID pandemic just before we had the COVID pandemic. So something to certainly, raise an eyebrow at when you see this as a potential scenario that the World Economic Forum is telling us to expect and prepare for. And as you quite rightly point out, that would certainly be very destabilizing and potentially be a reason to delay or postpone or cancel an election. Of course, I know you're hoping you're wrong, as am I, but it is something that is, like I say, on the bingo card for 2024, where many people say anything's on the bingo card for 2024 in terms of what we can expect. I want to circle back to the geopolitical tensions here. Certainly nothing to make light of, but you are focusing on Europe, and granted there are issues there. But of all the geopolitical hotspots, is that, where you see the most likely risk of escalation? We've got, as I say, China and Taiwan, and we very recently had President Xi vowing to prevent anyone from splitting Taiwan from China in any way, reiterating that a reunification of China and Taiwan is, quote, inevitable, and that it would be unstoppable. And this comes as Taiwan is preparing for crucial presidential and parliamentary elections on January 13th. And then, of course, we've also got the Middle East. We've got the Israel and Hamas war, which so far has been contained to that region, but we are seeing a surge in escalation in the Red Sea, with Houthi terrorists, militants backed by Iran, launching drone and missile attacks, causing significant disruption to shipping routes through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, which, I remind our viewers, accounts for about 10% of the world's trade flow. And we know that the U.S. is starting to take action against this, fighter jets shooting down several drones. So that is set to escalate, and they're now declaring the establishment of a coalition aimed at enhancing security measures in the Red Sea. That can very quickly turn into something big. And then, we've also have Iran moving ahead with its nuclear ambitions. And to that end, Israel allegedly taking out a top Iranian official, Sayed Razi Mousavi, in Syria. And he's allegedly in charge of coordinating missiles and other weaponry to Lebanon's Hezbollah terrorist group, which has been shelling in the north of Israel. So Israel hasn't commented on this, but it seems that it was most likely Israel behind this attack. So, Gary, I bring up these big points and ask you to put on your geopolitical strategist hat on and where do you think is the most likely flashpoint that does bring about this war, which I know you're not rooting for at all, but you're saying could happen?
Yeah, I think the flashpoint's going to happen wherever. Look, this isn't just happening by chance, right? It seems to be. And I would hate for this to turn into a political conversation because I'm not a political person really usually. But look, the Israeli thing happened. First thing we heard from the CIA and Mossad was that it just caught them off guard. Now, I look for anomalies, okay? I look for people that are telling fibs. And when people tell fibs, their stories don't line up. For the CIA and Mossad, that is basically the CIA equivalent in Israel, Mossad's credited for being the greatest, intelligence organization to ever exist on Earth. They both told us that they didn't know anything was happening. And then 24 hours later, when people said, hey, bullshit, okay, like we're going to call you out as that you're either incompetent or you did know. Now, hey, we did know. So that's enough for me, Michelle. I don't need to know anymore. Like someone knew something happened. I don't even listen to the whole Israeli construct, the story, because I'm not sure anything I'm hearing, unless you can show me pictures and endorsements and written documents. I just think most of this is, it's stirring the pot. So I think they'll do it wherever they can do it. And a cyber attack in the United States would be very, very impactful. Have I lost you?
No, you certainly have not lost me, Gary. I'm following everything that you're saying, and how this attack happened has certainly raised lots of question marks within Israel and outside of Israel, and there are various theories as to how this could have happened, especially considering the domestic division within Israel ahead of this, with much of the country actively against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his administration. And it certainly has caused a lot of questioning as to exactly how an attack of this nature was able to take place, and certainly something that I'm sure will be investigated further. But I'm sensing from you that whether it comes from an escalation in the Middle East, whether it comes from an escalation with China and Taiwan, whether it's the European situation, Russia, Ukraine, or some other flashpoint that gets out of hand, or a major cyber attack, which is certainly a probability, it doesn't matter, because to you, all roads lead to Bitcoin. So let's unpack that. Why Bitcoin? Why is Bitcoin your safe haven in all of this uncertainty?
Well, first off, it's a product it's an invention. Let's think about this as an invention, right? As a 21st century invention that happened just to show up at the right time, the right place to solve some problems that we've never, at least in America's history of 180 years or whatever it is, we haven't been able to deal with some of these issues. So we have a 15-year chart. I removed the first 8 years, and I have a 7-year chart that looks very, very impressive. A 5-year chart on Bitcoin is about 600% increase. Greatest performing asset in that period of time. Only nearly followed closely by Tesla. So it's not like we're back into 2008, 2013 when Bitcoin was really, really nascent and young. We're the 21st century, 2023. We've got 8 years behind us of decent volume. We have an ETF being launched here. I maintain that in the next 2 weeks, this will be looked upon as one of the greatest investment opportunities that allowed you and I and your children, your aunt, your sister, wherever they live in the world, to front run institutional funding into an asset class that has not been available to them, has not been understood by them, has been poo-pooed and naysayed by them. It's the only time in history I know that you and I and my mom could front run Goldman Sachs, Fidelity, BlackRock, and that ends in 2 or 3 weeks. Once this ETF is launched, it's over, okay? The window for you front running the large banks is done. The invention itself is the only finite product I know of, other than you and me. You and I are the only true finite, unique, peculiar personalities. The problem with you and I is we die. There's problems with us. People can shoot us. I get involved with the wrong woman. I go crazy, right? So that's a problem with my uniqueness. You're laughing, but you understand. Bitcoin doesn't have that. Bitcoin has all the similar, that you can't produce more Bitcoin no matter what the price is. And that's what I love about the gold, silver, and crude oil players, and in fact, real estate players. I have been surprised that more real estate, gold, and silver players haven't really gotten this very, very quickly. But if you think about being able to buy the finest, what do they say about real estate? Location, 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 right? Well, that means something. That means, that has better value than other real estate. Well, there's only one Bitcoin. There's unlike real estate or crude oil, which if we take crude oil to $120, you're going to produce a lot of crude oil that wasn't available yesterday, right? You will do a lot of things to get that crude oil out of the ground at $120. With Bitcoin, that is not achievable. Okay, you cannot accelerate the production of the last 2 million into the marketplace. So you can't bring new supply to the market. You can only unlock the supply that's being held in my wallet right now, which I've been collecting over the last 4 years, and I still don't think I have enough. But I think there's going to come a time when, of the 19 million units that have been issued, there's a lot of wealthy people. I think 85% of the super wealth on this planet hasn't invested a penny into Bitcoin. Not a penny.
Well,
and they already have allocations to gold, crude oil, NVIDIA. You can go buy the top 7 companies. I think these people have massive allocations to bonds, to real estate. My brother has massive real estate positions. Cool. You're not going to have any Bitcoin. You're going to have real estate, and that's okay, right? There are different investment strategies. Keep in mind, I do have gold. I do own silver. I like silver better than gold, quite frankly. I have ammo. I have guns. I have water. I have food. I live on the Gulf, so I can fish if I need to. My family, I have done my job as an alpha male to protect my family. Now my job is, can I protect their future, their ability to buy and to survive in an economy that's pretty weird.
Long live the alpha male, Gary. Let's break this down, though, because you're talking about 2 scenarios that I think we have to dissect Bitcoin's role in these scenarios. If we're looking at Bitcoin in the scenario where you're thinking we could have a major global conflict and we could even have a cyber attack, and hence you've got your gold and silver and guns and access to food and fishing and water. In that doomsday apocalypse scenario, why is Bitcoin where you want to be? Especially if you're saying a cyber attack is a potential for 2024 and beyond. I mean, surely in that scenario, and again, there's another scenario, I think Bitcoin is the way to go, but let's start off with this scenario. Why is Bitcoin where you see a safe haven, especially as opposed to gold, for example?
Well, I don't know if you've ever tried to carry $2 million worth of gold around, but it's complex. It's very heavy. In fact, I have $700,000 worth of silver in a vault over there, and it literally takes up the entire vault. Okay, but it's only 700 grand. I couldn't possibly carry all that silver with me. I can't even get on a plane with anywhere near that much silver. So the transportability of silver, I mean, I've done some business with Kitco before. I bought all my silver and gold from Kitco, but sending it back, it's problematic. So that for me is the liquidity problem It's not that gold is not liquid. It's me getting it to the point where it can be liquid.
But in a cyber attack scenario, Gary, is Bitcoin? Why Bitcoin?
No, but look, I could have bought Bitcoin at $300, and for 2 years I didn't, because I did this. Hey, what if the power goes out? Well, guess what? If the power goes up, you're not going to use your Visa card, your MasterCard, your American Express card, your wireless transactions, Venmo, Ripple. You're not using any of that. That's going down too.
Well, maybe you're using that silver you're lugging around.
You're not going to do wire transfers. You're not going to do ACH. Nothing is going to work. So that's a Mad Max world, right? That's really a scary world. And this is where I disagree with the Bitcoin maxis. I don't want this much adoption of Bitcoin. Okay, the adoption of Bitcoin, where it becomes the standard tomorrow morning, means we are a Mad Max. I'm not a supporter of that. I don't want to hold 500 to 1,000 Bitcoin and go, hey, look at me, man, I got a lot of Bitcoin, but we're all miserable. That is not a good outcome for us. Bitcoin's not going to solve the psychosis of our leaders. I mean, our leaders have gone over the top to really, I think, create more damage than they are a good. So I'm a big believer in, hey, let's hire some non-professional politicians and just give them a chance. I don't think they can screw it up any worse. Look, if I think a cyber attack's coming along tomorrow, this is what I wanted to do. I want to be in cash. I want to be in gold and silver and have a tremendous amount of weapons around me with friends, like a village. So I keep telling everybody, hey, y'all come on down to St. Pete, man. If you're a God-fearing person and you're good, come on down to St. Pete, because I need a bigger neighborhood of great people.
I can handle a weapon, Gary. I'll see you there.
Come on. That's what we need, okay? That's what we need. I'll teach you how to fish. So then we're good on food and protect our environment. But you can't really live that way, can we? We can't live like, okay, we're going to have a cyber attack tomorrow morning. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. It would be a way we would not have an election, though. That would absolutely be a way. And that's why I bring up the pipelines, because we should be asking ourselves, who blew those pipelines up? Okay, who blew the dam up that we don't even talk about anymore? Who escalated that event in Israel that just happened to come along at the very tail end of the Ukraine thing? So I think there's somebody stirring this stuff up, and I can't live that way and worry about it. I have to believe that, someone is sane minds are finally going to come about, but you cannot keep pushing morphine and heroin into this body, free capital, just print. And at some point we don't have some reckoning, right? Like, real estate goes up because there's a production of US dollars. Most of the value in real estate going up over time is because dollars continue to be printed, period. That's the only reason real estate's doubled. And for me, that's the inverse with Bitcoin. I can literally go, okay, I have a play here with Bitcoin that allows me to, if I'm wrong, then the US dollar and the market's wonderful. NVIDIA's at $8 million a share. Google's a $8 trillion company, and my Bitcoin's worth nothing. Okay, that's my worst case. My best case is, I got it right. We're going through a massive change from analog to digital in everything, both in mental and in physical. And Bitcoin seems to me to be better suited to serve that marketplace, because I think you and I are going to soon, we will own robots, and those robots will actually trade currency with each other. Let's say we both have assistants. Those robots are going to trade micro dollars, micro some value between each other for, setting up a lunch, getting you a plane ticket down here, whatever we're doing. Why are we doing that? It would be much better for a robot to do it and for you and I to pay that robot, so that we're able to use the future rental economy. See, I really believe we should be in a rental lease, pay for it as you use it, because if you pay for something as you use it, I think it helps better control how you consume it and how you waste it. And I think there's a lot of waste going on, which is probably a whole conversation, but I think we're probably 30% underpriced on all energy in the United States and Canada. 30%, at least 30% underpriced on the real value of electricity and energy. Otherwise, you would turn your laptop off at night. No one turns anything off in the Western countries. No one. That tells me energy is not priced correctly. That tells me there's too much of energy. Right? If we're wasting it.
I guess that is a way to extrapolate that theory if you're not turning off all of your appliances, although my energy bill would say otherwise. Let's bring it back to Bitcoin, and on the idea of energy and a cyber attack. There are Bitcoin maxis that would say that in the event of a cyber attack, the traditional financial system goes offline for a while and people's money potentially is lost. But for those that are true Bitcoiners and have their Bitcoin in cold storage, when things settle down, they're able to come out when the dust settles and interact with their Bitcoin, because a cyber attack will assumably be a temporary thing. We're not going to be offline forever. And whilst the financial institutions are reeling from that and funds are lost and accounts are lost, if you're a true Bitcoiner and you've had your Bitcoin, as I say, in cold storage, you're able to then reconnect when the dust settles and use your Bitcoin. So I think that is the Bitcoin maxi's answer to why Bitcoin during a cyber attack. But of course, you've got gold, which has been around for thousands and thousands of years and has proven that is a safe haven for all kinds of uncertainty. Let's go to your second scenario here. And because again, this is a tail risk that you're talking about. It's something that you're concerned about, but not necessarily seeing as happening in 2024. Just, why don't you give us the odds of how likely do you think this war is, or a cyber attack, or a major election disruption is for 2024? What kind of percentage would you allocate to that?
I'll be staggered if something substantial, what most people would refer to as a black swan, I will be massively surprised. In fact, I would make a $50,000 to $100,000 bet that sometime between now and August, there is some event that we like, wow, a COVID-19, 9/11 type event. I can't tell you what that's going to look like. Mm-hmm. Bigger than Ukraine, bigger than Israel current, bigger than all the people that are protesting that nobody wants to talk about across major cities all over the world. Like, that's happening right now. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's happening, right? Look, Michelle, I think we're already at civil. I mean, this is going to really freak people out, but I think we're at civil war in the United States. When the red politicians and the blue politicians, whatever that means, can't agree on what pencil to use, we're pretty much at war. We just don't have muskets pointed at each other yet. But you can't say that we have a lot of agreement on anything. And if you've ever been in a relationship, just a simple relationship, if you can't agree on basic principles, you're at war every day. And so when does it escalate? It usually escalates when someone wants to hold their position in space, right? Mm-hmm. They want to hold their position. They want to hold their old world. I don't like change any more than you do, or anyone else, but I'm pretty sure if I'm a monopoly or a cartel and I'm on the inner club, and there are inner clubs, it took me 40 years for somebody to confirm there are clubs that you and I will never be invited to, ever. It's just not, our DNA, our bloodline, just not going to make the cut. Most of those people, if I was there, I would not want to lose that position either. I mean, I don't want to lose my little comfortable position here in St. Pete. I don't want to go to war. But I would be shocked, absolutely shocked, if something massively significant doesn't happen in the next 6 months. Sadly.
Yeah. All right. Sadly, indeed. So some kind of black swan incident, not sure what it is, but you have it as a high probability for, I guess before the elections in 2024. On the other...
And then can I just interrupt you real quickly?
Go
and
for
then
it.
I think gold and silver will grossly outperform Bitcoin. But it is only under that circumstance, in my opinion, that gold and silver will outperform Bitcoin. They have not outperformed Bitcoin in the last 10 years, 13 years, or 5. They have not, okay? And it's actually weird because you would think gold would be a perfect setup, right, for a couple of incidences that have occurred in the last 5 years. And at $4,000, you're going to find a lot more gold than there is today. And that's why gold's never been able to do this. There isn't, at $6,000, how much gold could you find? I'm pretty sure 40% of the gold supply sitting around people's necks at some price will come off their neck and it will be sold to a pawn dealer. The China thing is like, yeah, inevitable. But is it this century or next century?
Right. Well, she did not give a specific timeline on that, but it seems to be sooner rather than later. But you're saying that gold would outperform in a scenario where this Black Swan event happens and a higher gold price will see people taking very different actions when it comes to their gold. Let's go to the scenario where the world does not blow up. We do not have a Black Swan event, but the economy continues in a way that it has now, and we have the usual factors which you touched on earlier, like the excessive stimulation, how you're saying that printing is going to be the solution. Let's assume that we don't have a catastrophic escalation of any geopolitical tensions, a cyber attack, but we do have the economy continuing as it is, and we do have potentially a Fed pivoting, and we do have more stimulus and more printing. What's your investment thesis in the things kind of carry on down the same road? It's not a great road, but there's nothing too catastrophic. What's your investment scenario for that?
I think there's a lot of people out there that are just a lot smarter than me that must understand game theory better than I do, but I don't understand the stock market. I think you were surprised yesterday when I told you that I have very, very, very little exposure to equities. I hate equities. Okay. I actually think I have better odds of going to Las Vegas and probably a lot more fun. I have better odds to make money, plus the benefit of having some fun than I do in Las Vegas. My grandfather, who was a gambler, okay, this guy was probably an organized crime. I'm not for sure, but I suspect my grandfather, who didn't have a visa from Italy, was a bit of a naughty boy. Good news is my mom raised me correctly, so I haven't been. But he always said that my father was a stockbroker, and he always told my dad, he's like, hey, the only thing difference between your business and my business is yours legal. Yours has been made legal by the United States. I don't understand most of the values of these companies. I also don't understand, about 15 years ago, it became very clear to me that regulation by the regulators is a very different definition that you and I thought what regulation was. I thought regulation was about opening markets. Yet, it appears to me by the stock price of every company that has paid a fine to the DOJ, the FTC, the SEC, every company that has undergone massive regulatory review, been split up, had to demerge, remerge, unmerge. Every one of these companies have benefited grossly by regulation. So when I have to look at regulation and go, oh, wow, when you're regulated, you actually get to pay to play, and then all your other competitors just get smaller and smaller, I have no understanding of the equity market or what drives it. So I don't invest in it. And I don't need to invest in it because I have Bitcoin to invest in. It's something that cannot be hypothecated easily. It cannot be duplicated. It cannot be accelerated. And it's very, 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 very unique in its in its properties that I can't replace any. I cannot find a product like this that's ever existed on this planet. And
Well,
I'd
then-
love somebody to tell me why it's not so rare.
Well, then let's talk about Bitcoin in the context of regulation that you just brought up. And one of the reasons we've seen a rally in Bitcoin is because of regulation and speculation that the Securities and Exchange Commission will approve a number of spot Bitcoin ETFs in early January. The latest news on that front is that the SEC convened last week with delegates from at least 7 firms, including the major players like BlackRock and Grayscale, and indicated that there's a final update for filing. That's December 29th, and that they've all updated their filings last week to allow for cash redemptions, which is seen as a strategic move to enhance the likelihood of approval of an ETF. And it looks like it's pretty much a done deal for approval in early January. That's regulation coming in to the Bitcoin space. So obviously you're very bullish on Bitcoin. What do you expect from a spot Bitcoin ETF? Do you see approval of that happening early next year?
I think by January the 8th, we're going to either have approval or we're going to know through particular behaviors and price that we have approval. So, and then within 2 weeks, this is what I did not really fully understand, but within 2 weeks, we could have an ETF actually trading, which is pretty phenomenal. If we look at gold and what happened to gold got the ETF November 04. I think gold was at, I made some notes last night, $438 November 2004. And that price went to November in 2011, went to $17.50 in 7 years on the ETF. So that was a 5x increase over 7 years. The funny thing is, nobody talks about, there was $100 of run up before the ETF. So gold was sitting at 300, moved to $400 a year before the ETF was approved. That's a 25% increase, right? Now you look at it and go, well, that wasn't very much money, but yeah, well, I think gold, I mean, you follow this market. I think gold is artificially suppressed by someone. In fact, we know people have paid fines for it. So that's going to be very difficult to do to Bitcoin, physical Bitcoin, not paper Bitcoin. You'll be able to hypothecate it, provide derivatives. And I believe that's true. Some of those tools are really healthy for the market. It's going to happen. But if you're talking about grabbing 3 million units of Bitcoin, I mean, let's just do the math. 400,000 super wealthy people on this planet, over $50 million in net worth. These are families worth liquid $50 million of capital. Just make an assessment what these 400,000 people do. You've known some really rich people. Have you ever known a super rich person that couldn't buy anything he wanted to? Like this really drives the Jeff Bezos of the world crazy, okay? Like, oh, I can't own that? Well, if you tell somebody they can't own it, they need to own it then, right? There's only 21 million of these units. I mean, I've got probably more than I deserve. And it's going to be very difficult for these people to pry this product out of my hand. It will only happen through price. And we have seen, this is a really weird product, okay? Because you just saw a shakedown of about 76% off the top. And if you go talk to the Wall Street guys, when you're in a perfect position to do this, say, hey, what's the weirdest thing about Bitcoin? They'll tell you, okay, over a glass of wine, dude, nobody sells this stuff. Like the price can get washed out 70, 80%. And these people are like, oh shit, isn't this awesome? I get to buy some more, which like I'm predicting I'm going to be able to buy $30,000 Bitcoin in the next 12 weeks. I can't wait. I can't wait for it. I cannot wait for a retracement.
So well, okay, let's unpack that then. So, I mean, Bitcoin is at what? It's about 42,000 now. You're seeing that Bitcoin is going to drop on the news of the spot Bitcoin ETF if you're saying you're going to be able to buy some at 30,000? So
no,
do you think...
I didn't say that. I said that I think in the next 12 weeks that I'll be able to buy Bitcoin on a retracement. Now, there's a lot of reasons that you'd have a retracement. 30% retraction isn't obscene. It is a volatile asset class, far more volatile than gold.
Absolutely.
Right?
So-
I mean, far more volatile, but it's also outpaced gold by, just look at the charts. It's pretty embarrassing for gold. No matter what Peter wants to say, it's embarrassing. Gold does not perform well against Bitcoin.
Well, Peter would say, take a look at gold over thousands and thousands of years, and Bitcoin's short, less than 2 decade history.
That's
But
ridiculous.
I'll have you and
though.
Peter hash that one out. I've already sparred with Peter enough in my day, so I'll have
Yeah.
you and Peter maybe hash that one out. But let's talk about what you expect from the price of Bitcoin. Again, putting all of these sort of tail risk scenarios aside, we get the spot Bitcoin ETF. You're expecting that in March. Do you think that the news has already been priced in, or do you expect to pop on news that the ETFs are approved?
I think the way I answer this question is, if an ETF on January the 8th, if the SEC comes out and says no approvals whatsoever, we're not doing this, Bitcoin will get crushed. Bitcoin will get crushed by at least, you'll be able to buy Bitcoin at $27,000 if that were to happen. So that tells me you have $15,000 built into the price for the ETF. If it would go down on that news, then you clearly have some part of this $44,000 is cooked in as part of the ETF. I cannot even imagine that some premium hasn't been paid for that. But I think there's a lot of things that can drive events like this. But it's pretty bulletproof. My God, man, they removed Stiller from Grayscale 2 days ago. They're cleaning house, man. The U.S. government was able to cut a deal with the Chinese for Binance to have the CEO come to the United States when he didn't have to. What did they have on him? What was that phone call like? Was it, you will be tracked for the rest of your life by Interpol? Or your banking will be so difficult, it will be impossible for you to do business? I don't know what that phone call was, but I've never seen a non-U.S. citizen voluntarily show up in the United States, sit in a jail cell, and wait his day in court. Not even court, and it happened in 7 days. So I think it actually shows more weakness against the U.S. government than it does Binance, but it just shows you the control that the financial system has. If I go back to the 400,000 people who are super wealthy, and I think only 20% of those people have actually deployed any money whatsoever, and I multiply that 400,000 families times $2.5 million of Bitcoin allocation, it is staggering, okay, how much Bitcoin would be required for that. And so I'm a pure supply and demand guy. So I'm so fundamental, it's scary. And when I see supply and demand metrics like this, I'm an all-in guy. That's why I say I think I'm grossly underallocated, because I do not think there is anything the U.S. government can do to stop Bitcoin. Nothing. I would love them to say no on January the 8th, because it would allow me to have a new buying opportunity at $20,000. And the U.S. government will miss out on one of the greatest opportunities that it's ever had to actually maintain another 40 or 50 years of its control over the world. So I just have never seen an opportunity like this. And I keep asking myself, how am I wrong? And I can't come up with an answer.
Well, I think the deadline is January 10th, but it could be the 8th. I think it's the 10th that they have to give a definitive answer by, but the point is taken nonetheless. But Gary, if they do not give an answer, maybe just push it down, that would trigger a sell-off as well. They're not saying a definitive no, they're just sort of kicking the can down the road on an answer to the spot Bitcoin ETF.
Well, January the 8th is the meeting with Grayscale, the January the 8th with Grayscale. So they could tell Grayscale, now, I don't, this Barry Stiller guy, right? They just had him resign. I'm sure he just did that voluntarily, right? come on. They're
Yeah.
basically looking at Grayscale going, hey, look, we want Fidelity and Big BlackRock to do this. We don't want you to do it. Quite frankly, the wealthy families would prefer to do business with Fidelity and BlackRock and Vanguard. They don't want to do business with very. He's got a bunch of noise on him, right? DCG. They have a bunch of noise. So he's like you and me. He's probably not going to get invited to the club. So to me, the Grayscale piece, you can't have Grayscale out there with 650,000 or 627,000 Bitcoin out on the edges.
Yeah.
So I just think we're going to know that week, right?
Right.
They could kill Grayscale though. I mean, I don't think, they could leave Grayscale out of it and the ETFs still fly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money in this trade for a lot of people, right? There's a lot of work being done here. So I just think let's say that we don't get any approvals. We still have the halving in April.
Right.
Okay. And to me, this is a double whammy. A double whammy being that my ideal scene for you and I would be they delay it and we go through the halving and then they redeem it and allow it.
Right. And
wow,
that allows
that would
you, and that allows you to build up your position in Bitcoin even further. But
that's correct.
So give me a price forecast for Bitcoin for, let's say, the end of 2024. Where do you see Bitcoin by then?
I have no idea, really. I really have no idea. This is not a product we've ever seen. This is what I keep talking to the chartists about. The chartists tell me, well, the RSI and the Elliott wave theory, and dude, yeah, that's awesome, but we've never seen a product like this. How can you chart something that has never been seen before, right? That you can't accelerate the production. So these are using models of an analog age where you can, this is on stocks that can be, you can just print more stock. You can create more outstanding shares. The Exxon can buy more of their own shares. This is unlike anything we've ever seen. I don't think people fully appreciate how substantially different Bitcoin is from all other financial products. But it could be 300,000 and it could be 40,000. I think it could be that. I think most certainly in the next 18 months, it should eat up half of gold's position. And that's not going to necessarily take anything away from gold. But it's only Bitcoin is less than $1 trillion market. It's a little bit bigger than Meta. And what would you rather own? Let me ask you a question. Would you rather own Meta for 5 years, a company that preys on children and everything else and uses your data without your knowledge? Or would you rather own Bitcoin that doesn't decay? It doesn't have a Mark Zuckerberg running it. It has no human error risk whatsoever. None.
Full disclosure, I own Bitcoin and I own gold. I don't see why I need to choose, and I own them for the same reasons, more or less. So yeah, full disclosure on that front, and I think that it's more risky to have zero exposure to Bitcoin than to have some exposure to Bitcoin in a portfolio, and I feel the same way about gold. Seeing as you're asking me my positions, that's my full disclosure on that one. But we're here to talk about you and your thoughts and your forecasts, Gary. So I know you're saying it's a tough range, but you're saying you want to increase your position. So surely you're leaning towards the price go up theory of Bitcoin. Give me a target range where you'd be happy with the Bitcoin Act, say this time, 2024.
I would be happy if Bitcoin was at $41,000.
So lower than we are today.
Well, I'm not going to be unhappy because my thesis for Bitcoin is not the next 12-month cycle. My thesis for Bitcoin is like every other business where I've made a tremendous amount of money. I build a business. I don't worry about how much distribution it's providing me tomorrow. My brother runs a business that like it has to cash flow tomorrow morning. I don't do that. I invest in private companies or build private companies, build them for 6, 7, 8, 10 years, and then I'm grossly underpaid most of my lifetime. This is the trick with successful people. We're grossly underpaid most of the time. And then 4 or 5 times in a lifetime, we get massively grossly overpaid. But it's never balanced, right? It's never perfect. So look, I think Bitcoin will be $1 million product at some point in its future. The question is it 5 years, 4 years, or 10? And to your point, zero's wrong, okay? And people talking about buying 1/10 of a Bitcoin, I think people should be going out of their way to figure out how to own 1 Bitcoin. And I don't know a lot of people that can't make 40 grand. Like, you can come work with me tomorrow morning on Saturdays and Sundays in 10 months. I have enough projects around my property alone to pay somebody 40 grand. So it's just about, are you willing to work, save, not spend money on stuff that decays? Like, I think Netflix decays. That $10 a month, $18 a month that I pay to Netflix, it decays. It has no investment value whatsoever. So I would rather take that $15, stop watching that crap, and I'm going to deploy it into a Bitcoin. And then I'll go to Starbucks, and then I'll go to the AMC theaters, and then I'll go, oh, you know what? I'm not going to go to bars and drink a half bottle of tequila with my buddies anymore, right? I'm not going on that holiday vacation for 60 grand. Instead, I'm going to buy 2 Bitcoin, put them away from my family, and wake up hopefully in 3 or 4 years and go, uh-oh, supply and demand kicked in, and Bitcoin's worth $250,000 each, which would only make it, I mean, if we go back to our 400,000 rich people, I think it's 30 million Bitcoin. 30 million Bitcoin required at a $2.5 million allocation. That is nothing for a super wealthy person to deploy $2.5 million into a portfolio. You know that. So that's 30 million Bitcoin, 27 million Bitcoin or something. There's only 19 of free float.
Yeah. And only ever be 21 million. Yeah.
That's right. So those supply and demand metrics for me are like, whew, I don't think it goes to zero. In fact, I have traded electricity below zero. I have bought crude oil for less than zero, and I've bought nat gas for less than zero. Bitcoin will never, ever go below zero.
You bought crude oil for less than zero?
Yeah. I mean, there are times when people are just long. Well, maybe not the crude, okay, but we've seen energy, we've seen electricity and nat gas trade sub-zero. Because if you're long and you're in a power system, I mean, you made a comment about the national balancing point in England. That was the point. Like, hey, if you're long into the system and it's too much energy, we'll give you a price, but it may have a negative in front of it. Well, that's why the nukes went bankrupt in the UK, because we created a market over there that didn't allow the utilities to hold back supply, really the bankers, to hold back supply to artificially raise the price to Joe consumer. We made supply and demand really speak to each other. And that's one of the things I really like about Bitcoin is the transparency of the supply and demand metrics that you and I were taught in school. That is the way you make investment decisions based on supply and demand. But when IBM stock now has the ability to, do all kind of derivatives, we don't understand their debt, they're issuing outstanding shares, blah, 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 it kind of takes away from the ability to look into a supply and demand metric and make a financial decision. That's why I like Bitcoin so much, because you can't alter that. And it allows you and I to be able to, and it's audited every 10 minutes. I mean, when was the Fed last audited? Every 10 minutes, Bitcoin is audited. That is cool.
Yeah, tremendous transparency.
There's no product like that. No product in the world is like that, right?
Tremendous transparency. Certainly my big takeaway from this conversation, Gary, is that you are very much a long-term Bitcoin bull. A little negative on what we can expect for 2024. Let's try and end it with a somewhat positive spin. What would you say is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Wow, heavy duty question. First off, I'm not trying to be negative, okay? I'm very, very careful to get too bullish. Like a lot of people follow me, and I do not have any interest in influencing people's financial decisions. If I told you, hey, I think it's going to be worth $250,000, I wouldn't want people to go out there and, buy. I could see $250,000 quite easily. I think we're going to see something we've never seen before if the whole world doesn't crater in front of us. But I think we're living in a moment in time. We're going to see a product that should perform in a way that we've never experienced before. Best advice? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Or best?
Yeah, best piece of advice or best insight that you've ever received. And you'd maybe like to pass on in the pay it forward.
Keep your closet clean. Make sure that your closet is so clean that when you're successful or when you're not, and you have a acrimonious event, that the enemy has nothing to pull on. Okay, like it is it is probably the greatest strength I've ever had in my life. I chose a long time ago to keep it clean. I could have done it naughty. But my mom taught me, she's like, there's two ways to win the game. You can cheat or you can play fair. And playing fair is more difficult. And I just chose that path. I have found it rewarding. I'm not nearly as financially rich as other people, but I think I've done really good for myself and I'm able to sleep well at night. But I've had people attack me. I mean, I had a guy come at me from Enron back in 2002. And he was going to, hey, I'm going to do an intelligence gathering exercise on Cardone and we're going to rip his head off. And the Enron guys started laughing. They're like, dude, this guy's an open book. There's nothing we know about him. I mean, there's nothing to pull on. So really clean your whole closet up. Make sure you're living a really clean, honest life. Pay your taxes or make sure you have a really great tax advisor. And like cheating and doing this kind of stuff, it's not worth it. So that'd be my advice. The other one would be stay away from redheads, blondes, and brunettes, because I haven't had much success with them. But
what does that leave then? Yeah, I was going to say, where does that leave you? Redhead, blondes, and brunettes. Where does that leave you then?
Yeah,
but
no,
I know. I get that you're a joke. Yes, I get that was a joke. And metaphorically, keep your closets clean, free of skeletons, and also literally, that's probably very good advice. Keep things neat and tidy. Well, Gary, thank you so much for sharing your advice and your insights with us and some of your less optimistic thoughts as well. Hoping you're wrong, but hoping you're right on some of your Bitcoin points. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. See you in the new year.
Thank you, Gary. We'll see you in the new year. Gary Cardone, thank you so much. And a quick thanks to our sponsor as we wrap up here, Swan Bitcoin. Swan does have a division that's dedicated to high net worth individuals and businesses and trusts to help them understand Bitcoin, all those companies that Gary was talking about that still need to get in the game. And the Swan private team offers a comprehensive Bitcoin investment platform with services like institutional level liquidity, concierge OTC service, inheritance and estate planning, tax loss harvesting, and more. And for Kitco viewers who are interested, there is a special link in the description of the video, so go ahead and check that out. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. From me, Michelle Makori, and the rest of the team, we'll see you soon.
On the Spot with Michelle Makori is brought to you by Swan Bitcoin. Swan Private is proud to be your partner on the journey into Bitcoin. Swan Private helps high net worth individuals, family offices, businesses, and trusts. Expert service, real relationships. Go beyond legacy finance. Build your own legacy. Swan.com/wealth.